Throughout history, there have been a number of men whose career goal was to rule the world, or at least what they considered a worthwhile piece of it. Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Napoleon Bonaparte, Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin. But in 465 BC, there was a king who did rule the world, or at least a huge chunk of it. In history, he's known as Xerxes I. In the Bible, he's named as Ahasuerus. The Persian Empire was, contemporarily, the largest empire in history. 2.1 million square miles, from ancient Egypt in the west to the Indus Valley in the east. It was founded by Cyrus the Great in 550 BC, who ruled for 30 years before dying in battle. It was passed on to his son Cambyses, who conquered Egypt but died of a flesh wound. It was then passed on to his brother Bardia, but he was overthrown by Darius the Great, who expanded the empire greater than ever before. But despite all his power, Darius the Great had a hard time taking Greece. He tried in 492 BC, but his fleet was wrecked in a storm. He then sent ambassadors to all parts of Greece, demanding their submission. Everyone agreed except for Athens and Sparta. So, in 490 BC, Darius ordered a full military campaign, but met a humiliating defeat against the less powerful Athenian army in what was called the Battle of Marathon. Darius went home to plot another invasion, but died before he could carry it out. So it would be up to his son Ahasuerus to take Greece. In 483 BC, the king called for all the nobles of Persia to attend a gathering in the capital city of Shushan. The king would plan his Greek invasion and celebrate the glory of his mighty kingdom. Perhaps a preview of the celebration they would have after the king put the Athenians and the Spartans in their place. And it is here where the book of Esther in the Old Testament begins.
Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, this is Ahasuerus who reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 127 provinces, that in those days when the king sat on the throne of his kingdom, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces, being before him.
The celebration lasted 6 months, a tremendous display of the wealth and glory of his empire. But I guess 6 months was not enough, because when it was all over, the king gave a special week-long party for the palace servants and officials. There was an abundance of royal wine, for the king was feeling very generous. The Queen of Persia was a woman named Vashti, who some believe was the great-granddaughter of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. They say she was kidnapped by Darius the Great, who gave her to his son as a gift. Whatever her true background, the Bible made her famous as the first feminist icon, the gal who took the first stand for women's rights.
Also Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look on.
But the queen refused to come. The Bible doesn't tell us why, but some believe the king wanted her to appear naked. Whatever the reason, the queen's refusal looked very bad for the king. Here was a man ruling over the biggest empire on earth, preparing for a huge invasion to make his empire even bigger. And yet, he couldn't even control his own wife.
Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. Then the king said to the wise men, What shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to law, because she hath not done the bidding of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains? And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Vashti the queen hath not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes, and to all the peoples that are in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen will come abroad unto all women, to make their husbands contemptible in their eyes, when it shall be reported.
In the ancient Persian world, if your husband was king, a wife's disobedience to her husband was a capital crime that could not be overlooked. And every man in the room must have been filled with terror at the thought of their wives casually dismissing their authority. The king's advisor, Memucan, continued, And before this day is out, the wife of every one of us officials throughout your empire will hear what the queen did, and will be talking to us husbands the same way, and there will be contempt and anger throughout your realm. We suggest that, subject to your agreement, you issue a royal edict, a law that can never be changed, that Queen Vashti be forever banished from your presence, and that you choose another queen more worthy than her. When this decree is published throughout your great kingdom, husbands everywhere, whatever their rank, will be respected by their wives. The king and all his aides thought this made good sense, so he followed Memucan's counsel and sent letters to all the provinces, in all the local languages, stressing that every man should rule his home and should assert his authority. The king and his massive army made their much-hyped invasion of Greece. They captured and burned Athens, but the Athenian general lured the Persian navy ships into the Straits of Salamis, which was between the island of Salamis and the Athenian port of Piraeus. The ships became disorganized and were soundly defeated by the outnumbered Greeks. Fearful of being captured or trapped in Europe, the king returned home, most likely in foul spirits over the Salamis disaster. And he began thinking about his ex-wife and how he may have been too hasty in kicking her out of the kingdom.
After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what was decreed against her. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, Let there be fair young virgins sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Hege, the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, and let their things for purification be given to them. And let the maiden which pleaseth the king to be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so.
It would be the perfect distraction from thoughts of war and his ex-wife, the world's first official beauty contest. And the winner becomes nothing less than the queen of the biggest empire on earth.
There was a certain Jew in Shushan the palace, whose name was Mordecai, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives that had been carried away with Jeconiah king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maiden was fair and beautiful. And when her father and mother were dead, Mordecai took her for his own daughter.
And so we meet the heroine of the story and her devoted cousin/foster father. They were among the Jews who stayed in Babylon after their captivity instead of returning to Judea. And because she was young and beautiful, Esther would be called to the palace to become a contestant in this royal Persian beauty hunt.
So it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him.
Haggai was a eunuch slave of the king's court with a huge responsibility, organizing who knows how many beautiful young women. And, without knowing it at the time, his special interest in Esther would play a significant role in the preservation of the Jewish people in Persia. He ordered for her a special menu, favored her for the beauty treatments, gave her 7 girls from the palace as her maids, and gave her the most luxurious apartment in the harem. She was living like a queen before she even became queen. Mordecai told Esther not to tell anyone that she was a Jew, though the Bible doesn't explain why. Some believe it was because her Jewish background might dismiss her chances to be queen. Mordecai came daily to the court at the harem to ask about Esther and find out what was happening to her. The instructions concerning these girls were that before being taken to the king's bed, each would be given 6 months of beauty treatment with oil of myrrh, followed by 6 months of special perfumes and ointments.
Then in this wise came the maiden unto the king. Whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the women, to the custody of the king's chamberlain, who kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and she were called by name.
In other words, the stakes were very high. If you weren't chosen, you could be put out to pasture forever.
Now when the turn of Esther was come to go unto the king, she required nothing but what Haggai the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head, and made her queen instead of Vashti.
To celebrate the occasion, he threw another party for all his officials and servants, giving generous gifts to everyone, and making grants to the provinces in the form of remission of taxes. And who doesn't enjoy a break on their taxes? By that time, Mordecai had become a government official, and he just happened to be in the right place at the right time to overhear of a deadly plot.
In those days, while Mordecai was sitting in the king's gate, 2 of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those that kept the threshold, were wroth, and sought to lay hands on the king Ahasuerus. And the thing became known to Mordecai, who showed it unto Esther the queen. And Esther told the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition was made of the matter, and it was found to be so, they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king.
Mordecai's report would one day come to his aid in a spectacular way.